Morbid Facts. This video shows Florida mother Brianna Williams puking after hearing the news that the body of her missing 5-year-old daughter Taylor had been discovered. Williams first reported Taylor missing in April of 2019, 7 months before her body was found. But in reality, Brianna had horribly neglected her daughter until she tragically ended up starving to death. Brianna secretly placed Taylor's body in the back of her car, wrapped her in a garbage bag, and buried her in a shallow grave. Williams pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Often called the world's youngest political prisoner, in 1995, Gendun Chuki-Nyima was chosen at the age of 6 as the next Panchen Lama, the second highest authority of Tibetan Buddhism and the selector of the next Dalai Lama. But 3 days after being chosen, the boy and his family were kidnapped by the Chinese government and haven't been seen nor heard from in nearly 30 years since. When Karla Homolka met active serial rapist Paul Bernardo in 1987, they quickly formed a heinously criminal relationship. The pair would go on to grape and murder at least 3 young girls, including Karla's own little sister, Tammy. On Christmas Eve in 1990, Karla allegedly gave 15-year-old Tammy's virginity to Paul as a Christmas gift after drugging her with tranquilizers. Tammy ended up choking to death on her own vomit and died, after which Karla put on her deceased sister's clothes and proceeded to have intercourse with Paul on the girl's bed. Tammy's death was ruled an accident, and the couple went on to kidnap 2 more teenage girls, holding them captive for several days while abusing, sodomizing, and eventually killing them. When their crimes were uncovered, police found videotapes of the couple performing these heinous acts on their victims. Karla managed to negotiate a plea deal known as the Deal with the Devil in exchange for her testimony against Paul. He's now spending the rest of his life in prison while Karla is happily remarried with children. In 2004, a deranged fan rushed the stage during the first song at a Pantera concert and fatally shot legendary guitarist Dimebag Darrell multiple times with a pistol. He then killed 3 others attempting to subdue him while injuring 3 more before being shot in the head by an officer. The killer's motive remains unclear to this day. During a live firing demonstration in 1942, a Royal Air Force pilot accidentally opened fire on a crowd of spectators. 25 British soldiers were killed while another 71 were wounded after being mistaken for dummies. After his floppy trouser snake was torn off in a car accident when he was 6 years old, 43-year-old Mohammed Abad received a fully functional bionic 8-inch pecker. It was constructed over a 3-year period using skin grafts and is complete with a mechanical interior and a fluid pouch to give him erections at the press of a button. According to the surgeons involved, its function is still complete enough for Abad to be able to father a child with his still intact right nut. In November of '99, the girlfriend of Panthers wide receiver Ray Caruth was shot 4 times and later died in the hospital. It was soon determined that her NFL boyfriend had hired a hitman to kill her after she reportedly refused to abort their baby. The baby ended up surviving, and Caruth went to prison for 19 years before being released in 2018. During a tense pro basketball game in 1992, Serbian player Boban Jankovic was frustrated with a foul call and slammed his head into a padded concrete post. He immediately dropped to the floor and was never able to walk again after badly damaging his spinal cord. Earlier this year, 44-year-old Pennsylvania man John Matthew Chapman was sentenced to life in prison after driving his girlfriend across the country and luring her into a Nevada desert for a bondage photo shoot. He then bound her to a signpost with zip ties, taped her mouth and nose shut, and watched as she died. Last September, 39-year-old Florida mom Kathy Griffith was brutally stabbed to death by her teenage son Colin. He called 911 saying, "I had a very, very long fight with my mom. She fell on a knife and she's bleeding from the neck." Police arriving at the scene described Colin as showing zero emotion, and the first thing he said to them was, "I know my rights." This all transpired just 1 year after Colin was charged with fatally shooting his divorced father Charles, but was released on the claim of self-defense. Kathy trusted her son at the time and even bailed him out of jail. Leading up to Kathy's murder, Colin had reportedly threatened to kill his mother many times, but she continued to love him unconditionally. He was said to be a very spoiled child who had been in and out of mental facilities for years after being diagnosed with PTSD. According to reports, Colin developed this after being held captive by his father for over 1,000 days without human contact upon telling his dad that he was gay. Colin has been charged with first-degree murder, as prosecutors have described him as a violent murderer who must be kept separate from civil society. In 2015, Caitlyn Jenner rear-ended a 69-year-old woman at a red light who was thrown into oncoming traffic and fatally struck by a Hummer. Jenner claims the paparazzi was at fault for the crash after constantly stalking the reality star and pulling up too closely to Caitlyn's car. The case was settled outside of court as Jenner avoided any charges for the tragedy. Shoes discovered in the wreckage of the Titanic are often found in pairs because they were worn by the victims when they died. Their entire bodies disintegrated, but the shoes remained intact due to protective oils in the leather. In 2012, Nigerian businessman and polygamist Yoroko Onaja died after 5 of his 6 wives forced him to have intercourse with each of them. They were apparently jealous of the attention he gave to his youngest wife and threatened him with knives, demanding he sleep with them. Onaja managed to have intercourse with 4 of them, but apparently had a heart attack and stopped breathing before reaching the 5th. In 2009, Florida woman Carol Bryan received facial fillers that were mistakenly injected into the wrong spot, causing her forehead to swell up so severely that she went blind in one eye. Carol went from a fashion model to a recluse, refusing to leave her home for years due to the monstrous appearance of her face. Medical students in the UK were recently left astonished after the autopsy of a 78-year-old man. He unknowingly lived his whole life with 3 dicks, an extremely rare condition known as supernumerary penile formation. Polish adventurer Alexander Doba kayaked solo across the Atlantic 3 times, once at the age of 70. 4 years later, he reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, sat down for a break, fell asleep, and never woke up. In 2009, 2 women bet 28-year-old Russian man Sergei Tuganov $4,300 that he couldn't last 12 hours in bed with them. He won the bet, but later suffered a fatal heart attack after consuming an entire bottle of Viagra. The double rainbow guy Paul Vasquez was a constant uploader on YouTube and created thousands of videos. Even though he died of an illness in 2020 at the age of 57, he scheduled 15 years of uploads in advance before he died, leaving his channel still very active now 4 years after his death. This is the tragic transformation of Florida man Robert Hardister, who was arrested 9 separate times for various infractions over an 8-year span. British doctor Thomas Kwan recently attempted to murder his mother's partner in one of the strangest ways possible. He disguised himself as a nurse and knocked on the man's door to offer him a free COVID jab. But instead of the vaccine, he put an unidentified poison in the syringe and injected it into his stepdad's arm. The next day, the man experienced serious pain and blistering in his shoulder, prompting him to go to the hospital and having part of his arm removed. He ended up surviving the bizarre attack, and Kwan was charged with attempted murder. In 1978, Hustler magazine owner Larry Flynt was shot in the spine by a white supremacist serial killer, who was apparently outraged by an interracial photo shoot in one of the magazine editions. Flynt survived the murder attempt but was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Years later, Flynt pleaded for his attacker to be spared from execution, saying, "A government that forbids killing among its citizens should not be in the business of killing people itself." But with up to 22 total victims and the desire to start a race war, the serial killer was eventually put to death by lethal injection. Around 1:30 a.m. in August of 2021, a woman wearing only a bra and leggings was captured on a trail cam in a remote North Carolina forest. 3 hours later, she was captured again, this time walking much slower with a noticeable limp. 6 months later, the woman's remains were found in the same area, still wearing the same clothing. Despite all efforts to identify her, the woman remains a complete mystery to this day. According to Hinduism, the Yamuna River is considered a river of heaven and is believed to cleanse the mind of sin. Every year, thousands of people drink from and bathe in the water despite its toxic foam, which is the result of poorly treated sewage that's constantly dumped directly into the river. Various chemicals in the foam are known to have many negative health effects, including skin irritation, hair loss, breathing issues, and brain damage. Earlier this year, a former model and Miss Switzerland finalist was allegedly murdered by her husband, who then reportedly dismembered her body and pureed her remains in a blender. In 1947, there is a case in Louisiana where a young man failed to die during a botched electric chair execution, so his lawyers tried to argue that he had already been executed and that it was cruel to go through it a second time. After much deliberation, the Supreme Court eventually ruled against him, and the man was successfully executed by electric chair the next year. Found in a jungle cave in 1867, a feral boy named Dina Sanichar preferred eating raw meat, had trouble standing on two legs, growled like a wolf, chewed on bones to sharpen his teeth, and never learned how to speak. He eventually became the inspiration for Mowgli in the Jungle Book. In 2016, 11-year-old Nebraska girl Lulu Gilreath was going on her first carnival ride when it quickly turned into anyone's worst nightmare. Her hair got caught in the machinery of a spinning ride at a carnival, and her scalp was almost completely torn off. The horrible accident damaged both of her eyes and nearly killed her. After World War II, Japanese General Hitoshi Imamura was sentenced to 10 years in prison after failing to control his unit, which committed horrible atrocities toward Allied soldiers. Believing that his own sentence was too light compared to the men under his command, Imamura built a replica prison in his garden where he stayed for decades until his death in 1968. This woman was caught on camera doing something deeply disturbing to win a chess match. Earlier this year, Russian pro chess player Amina Abakarova apparently needed a way to knock her opponent out of a tournament. So she decided to go to the extreme and poison the woman, 30-year-old Ume Osmanova, in what's being treated as an assassination attempt. Amina poured mercury from a thermometer onto the victim's chessboard before her next match and smeared it all over her side of the board with one of the pieces. Osmanova said she began feeling unwell during her match 30 minutes later, complaining of sudden severe nausea and dizziness, prompting an immediate call for medical assistance. After the security footage was reviewed by authorities, Amina had no choice but to confess to the murder attempt. Osmanova ended up making a full recovery, as the attacker was banned from future chess competitions and stripped of her previous titles. Abakarova now potentially faces several years in Russian prison for the senseless attack. Morbid news. 31-year-old One Direction member Liam Payne has died after falling from the third floor of his balcony at an Argentinian hotel. In a statement, local authorities say they had responded to reports of an aggressive man who could be under the effects of drugs and alcohol. Upon arriving, they found Payne's lifeless body on the ground where the hotel manager had told them he heard a loud thud. The musician had been very open about his persistent struggles with addiction and depression in the past, but the details surrounding his death remain unclear at this time. With the Menendez brothers back in the spotlight, let's take a look at the true reasons why the boys killed their parents. For starters, photos were found of the boys' unclothed bodies at 6 and 8 years old, which had their heads cropped out and focused on their privates. In one of the photos, 6-year-old Eric appears to be erect. The pics were sealed in an envelope with their mother's handwriting on it saying Eric's 6th birthday. According to medical records, there is an unexplained injury to the back of Eric's throat when he was 7 years old. Dr. Carrie English testified that the type of injury was a clear indication of oral copulation in children. When Lyle was 9 years old, he told his cousin Diane Vandermolen that he was afraid his dad was gonna come into his room, and that he and his dad had been touching each other down there. Diane also said that one time Jose put Lyle on a kitchen counter and prompted Lyle to jump off and he was going to catch him. As Lyle did so, Jose backed off and let him fall to the ground, telling him that you can never trust anybody. Their cousin Andy Cano testified that when he was 10 years old, 12-year-old Eric told him that his dad was massaging his D. Eric was trying to find out if these massages were normal and eventually told Andy that these massages are beginning to hurt. Andy ended up dying at age 30 from sleeping pills, and his mother told reporters he died because he couldn't cope with the incarceration of his cousins. After Andy passed away, his mother found a letter that 17-year-old Eric had written to him a few months before the murders. In the letter, Eric mentions the non-stop abuse. Mom isn't doing good. I don't know why she puts up with dad's shit. At times, I wish I could talk to her about things, you know? But the way she worships him and tells him everything, I'm just so afraid she'll tell him whatever I say. I just can't risk it. So I'm stuck here alone. I've been trying to avoid dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. He's so overweight that I just can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I a serious wimpus? I don't know, I'll make it through this. I can handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about it. Two more cousins, Kathleen and Alan, spent summers at the Menendez household and said the father would often take the boys to their bedroom and forbid the cousins from going down the hall. The cousins also testified in court that Jose and the boys often showered together, even when they were teenagers. Alan and Kathleen said they could hear cries and moans coming from the bedroom, but Kitty Menendez would turn up the TV volume really high so that they couldn't hear what was happening. At the age of 14, Lyle Menendez wrote a school essay called "I Will Change Your Verdict," about a man who's sentenced to death for killing a child molester to protect a 12-year-old boy. Just before writing the essay, Lyle found out for the first time that his father had been molesting 12-year-old Eric. The essay reads, "A man awaits his turn on the electric chair. You, the average citizens of America, put that man there. Now you can taste his death. You hope it hurts and is slow. Do you know what drove him to do it? You never even gave him a chance to talk. He only wanted to say a few things, but no, not you. You couldn't let this thing talk as if he had rights or feelings. You only looked at the evidence, smiled, and yelled guilty. Why, my friend? Why?" At that same age of 14, Lyle began losing his hair, an indication of the stress and psychological turmoil he endured as a child. He also continued playing with stuffed animals and wetting the bed well into his teenage years due to the lasting effects of the abuse. After the murders, the brothers were both evaluated in jail by some of the best child abuse and trauma experts in the country, and they all concluded that both the boys had been severely traumatized, molested, and abused. Dozens of other witnesses, including friends, family members, neighbors, teachers, and coaches, supported these claims throughout the first trial. But despite all this, the first trial ended with 2 deadlocked juries, since all of the men reportedly raised their hands in favor of first-degree murder, while none of the women raised theirs. In the retrial, the judge didn't allow any testimony about the sexual abuse claims, and both brothers were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Several jurors from the second trial later revealed that they never would have voted in favor of first-degree murder if they had known about the detailed history of their awful abuse. Here are some dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school. Former U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson reportedly had a massive Johnson that he was very proud of. He was known to frequently display it in public and even nicknamed it Jumbo. Apparently, when LBJ used urinals, if another guy walked into the bathroom, he'd turn around and shake his hog at the guy while saying, "Have you ever seen anything as big as this?" Eadwig, King of England from 955 to 959, allegedly left his coronation feast to have a threesome with his future wife and her mother. He was only 15 years old at the time. In the early 1900s, King Edward VII had a custom-made love chair. The chair allowed the 300-pound man to indulge in his sexual fantasies without crushing his female partners. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is notoriously said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave, who died just 11 days after giving birth to Mary. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for more than 30 years until her death in 1851. There's an incredibly disturbing reason why female mummies found in ancient Egypt are always far more decomposed than their male counterparts. Because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies, which were often kept hidden for several days until they started to rot. The reason was to discourage the embalmers from engaging in necrophilia with the bodies. In 1899, French President Félix Faure died of a stroke while receiving head from his mistress. Our ancient ancestors definitely had their priorities in check, considering the dildo was invented some 20,000 years before the wheel. During their expedition across America, Lewis and Clark only consumed meat and had terrible constipation as a result. In response to this, they started taking laxative pills made of mercury, and thus left mercury deposits wherever they would relieve themselves along the path. To this day, if you follow the same trail as the core of discovery with a metal detector, you can find all the exact spots where Lewis and Clark baked a keister casserole. When future President JFK was dating Miss Denmark Inga Arvid in the 1940s, the FBI once bugged their room because they thought she was a Nazi spy. Turns out they didn't hear much conversation, but instead just a lot of spicy time. But that's not the crazy part. The reason why the FBI thought Inga was a Nazi spy was because she was Hitler's companion during the 1936 Olympics, and he once described her as the perfect example of Nordic beauty. This means that Hitler and JFK may very well have been Eskimo bros. The first confirmed minor to be executed in the United States was 16-year-old Thomas Granger in 1642, who was sentenced to death for intercourse involving several animals, including a mare, a cow, 2 goats, multiple sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey. Authorities consulted with his parents prior to the execution, and they thought that he would never be able to live this down. All parties agreed it would be best to simply execute him and wash their hands of the whole situation. Badasses of history. After finishing his regular 12-mile run in 1976, Armenian swimming champion Shavarsh Karapetyan witnessed a trolley bus filled with 92 people crash into a freezing cold reservoir. Despite the sewage-infested water with poor visibility, he swam down 30 feet deep and broke the bus's back window with his legs. He then dove down 20 separate times, pulling out a total of 37 people, 20 of whom survived. Shavarsh then spent 45 days in the hospital, suffering from glass cuts, pneumonia, lung damage, and sepsis, which abruptly ended his swimming career. Reflecting on the rescue, he was once quoted saying, "It was so dark down there that I could barely see anything. One of my dives, I accidentally grabbed a seat instead of a passenger. I could have saved a life instead." That seat still haunts me in my nightmares to this day. Less than 10 years later, Shavarsh ran into a burning building, saved multiple lives, and once again spent an extended time in the hospital due to severe burns. Here are some people who died in the worst positions imaginable. In 2012, 16-year-old Kyle Plush was pinned by the backseat of his 2004 minivan while reaching for his tennis gear. He managed to call 911, telling them he was about to die, but the dispatcher couldn't understand him. Within 30 minutes, Kyle died from asphyxia. This horrifying diagram shows how spelunker John Jones was stuck upside down in the Nutty Putty Cave for 27 hours before dying. In 1989, the body of a 26-year-old man was found stuck in a sewer tank at a primary school in Japan. He apparently squeezed through a 14-inch opening to spy on women using the toilet, but got stuck and eventually died from hypothermia. This famous mummy found in Pompeii appeared to be satisfying himself during his final moments in 79 AD. While working his shift at an Iowa supermarket, Larry Moncada went missing and wasn't found for 10 years. He'd apparently fallen headfirst into a tight gap between a freezer and a wall, and his screams were most likely drowned out by the sounds of the coolers. I'll never look at Pokemon the same after this. An unknown perpetrator recently managed to hack into Game Freak's documents and released countless files, including future game data, personal info about employees, and most notoriously, lore stories about sexual relationships between humans and Pokemon. One such story involves a young girl who is kidnapped by a Typhlosion disguised as a human, that apparently proceeds to grape the child and get her pregnant with a human Pokemon hybrid. Another story involves a group of humans that capture and torture a bunch of Slackoths. One of the women in the group is later kidnapped by the Slackoth tribe and impregnated by their slacking leader, eventually giving birth to her own Slackoth baby. Similar disturbing stories detail human relationships with Lapras, Rapidash, and Octillery. Game Freak has reportedly apologized to everyone affected by the data breach. But it's unclear why these particular unsettling stories were ever written in the first place, let alone found among Game Freak's files. The rarest things in the world. Chechen girl Amina Ependiva is diagnosed with two rare genetic conditions: albinism, which makes her skin and hair extremely white, and heterochromia, in which her eyes are two completely different colors. Speaking of albinism, this extremely rare white killer whale was spotted off the coast of Alaska in 2020. The odds of this happening are about 1 in 10,000, as only 8 albino orcas have ever been seen in recorded history. Svalbard, Norway is the only visa-free zone in the world. Regardless of citizenship, anyone can live and work there for as long as they want. Oh, not the rare bison sirloin roast. I'm trying to record a video here. Sheesh. Bill Watterson, creator of Calvin and Hobbes, refused to license his characters for any toys or products, but he made an exception for a 1993 textbook called Teaching with Calvin and Hobbes that was made to help students with learning disabilities. Only around 20 copies are known to exist, and the most recent one sold for over $10K in 2009. These are some of the rarest photographs ever taken. This is the clearest and most recent photo ever taken on the surface of Venus. It was taken by a Soviet space probe in 1982, just before it was destroyed by the dense 900-degree atmosphere on the planet. This incredible photograph of Freddie Mercury performing on stage was taken by a 16-year-old girl who snuck her camera into a Queen concert in 1978. Here's an aerial photograph showing an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon that was ready to go to battle against a helicopter. Someone accidentally deleted important photos from their camera, so an image recovery software brought them all back, including this test shot taken where the camera was assembled somewhere in China. This incredible award-winning photograph from 2017 left scientists from all over the world completely astonished. At the very center of the image is a single atom that was suspended in motion by electric fields. What makes this photo so amazing is that it was captured by just an ordinary camera. Photographer Herbert van der Beek captured this insanely rare moment of a jaguar diving underwater to catch its prey. Unlike domesticated cats, jaguars love the water and are known to be excellent swimmers. In 1932, Dr. Eric Solomon faked a broken arm so that he could sneak a camera in his cast to photograph the Supreme Court. It's one of only 2 existing photos of the Supreme Court in session. Here's an amazing photo of a diver at Silfra Fissure in Iceland touching both North America and Europe at the same time. This is an extremely rare view of people peeking out the balcony of the Statue of Liberty. This area has been closed to the public since 1916 due to terrorist threats. A Florida photographer captured this incredible image of an owl raising a duckling after mistaking the egg for its own. Concerned that the owl would eat the duckling once it realized the situation, a local wildlife sanctuary agreed to take care of the baby bird when they had the chance to steal it from the owl's nest. There are only 20 stealth bombers in the world, but this one was caught mid-flight in a Google Maps photo. Now that's what I call a photo bomber.